What if I told you that everything you know about arguing is wrong? That the way you negotiate with your spouse, your doctor, your real estate agent, it's all backwards. I'm talking about the techniques used by FBI hostage negotiators, the same people who talk criminals out of bad decisions, the same strategies that have saved lives. And here's the thing, these aren't tricks. They're not manipulation. They're the science of how humans actually communicate. Today, we're breaking down Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference, the book that teaches you how to negotiate like someone whose job literally depends on getting the right outcome. Because whether you're fighting with your teenage son about curfew, negotiating your medical bills, or trying to sell your house for top dollar, you're negotiating. And most of us? We're losing. Let's be honest. When was the last time you won an argument? Not just got your way, actually won. Left the conversation feeling like both sides understood each other and reached something better than what either person started with? Probably not recently. Here's why. We've been taught to negotiate like it's a chess match. You make a move, I counter. Back and forth until someone gives up. Split the difference. Be reasonable. Find the middle ground. Sounds fair, right? It's the worst advice you could follow. Think about it. If you ask for $200,000 on your house and they offer $180,000, and you split the difference at $190,000, who won? Nobody. You both left money on the table. But that's not even the real problem. The real problem is deeper, when you approach negotiation as a confrontation, as you versus me. You've already lost the psychological battle. You're in a scarcity mindset. You think there's only one pie, so if they get a bigger slice, you get less. But what if there were 10 different pies? What if the real negotiation isn't about money at all, but about understanding what actually matters to the other person? This is where most people fail. We listen to respond, not to understand. You're already thinking about your counter-argument while they're still talking. You're not curious. You're defensive, especially with the people closest to us, our spouses, our parents, our kids. We think we already know what they want, so we don't ask. We assume. And then we wonder why conversations turn into arguments. Voss spent decades negotiating with people who had nothing to lose and everything to gain by lying or walking away. And he discovered something radical. The moment you stop trying to convince someone and start trying to understand them, everything changes. Tactical empathy. That's the foundation of everything in this book. And before you roll your eyes thinking this is some soft, feel-good nonsense, understand this. The most powerful hostage negotiators in the world use empathy as a weapon. Not to be kind, but to be effective. Here's what tactical empathy actually means. It's the ability to recognize the other person's emotional state and use that recognition to guide the conversation in a direction that serves both of you. Notice I didn't say serves you. It's both. Voss uses an example from a real hostage negotiation. A man had taken his girlfriend hostage. The standard approach? Demands, ultimatums, threats. Instead, Voss's team did something different. They asked questions, genuine questions, not interrogation. Questions that showed they were trying to understand why this person was so desperate, so angry, so frightened. What happened? The guy opened up. He started talking about his real problems, his insecurity, his fear of abandonment. And once they understood what was really driving his behavior, they could address it. Not the hostage situation, the root problem. Here's how this works in your life. Your teenage son comes home and you immediately ask, "Why are you late?" That's not empathy. That's accusation dressed up as a question. Tactical empathy sounds like, "You seem frustrated. What happened?" Notice the difference? You're not attacking. You're observing. You're inviting him to explain himself, not defend himself. Same with your spouse. Instead of, "Why didn't you listen to what I said about the house sale?" Try, "I notice you're hesitant about the price we're asking. What's your concern?" One feels like an attack. The other feels like you actually want to understand. And here's the magic. When people feel understood, they lower their defenses. They stop arguing their position and start sharing their actual concerns. That's when real negotiation can happen. Let me give you a practical example that applies to almost every adult. You're negotiating your medical bills. The hospital billing department sends a statement. It's higher than you expected. Your instinct is to call angry, demanding an explanation. Tactical empathy would sound like this. Hi, I received my bill and I want to understand something. Can you walk me through how this amount was calculated? I'm sure there's a reason, and I want to understand the process. See what you did? You acknowledged that they probably have a good reason. You positioned yourself as someone trying to learn, not someone trying to fight. Now they're more likely to actually explain, more likely to see if there are adjustments, more likely to work with you, because you didn't make them defensive. This is the first pillar. Everything else builds on this. Okay, so you're practicing tactical empathy. You're asking better questions. You're listening. Now comes the technique that freaks people out when they first learn it. Mirroring. It sounds simple, because it is. But don't let that fool you. Mirroring is when you repeat back the last few words of what someone said, just the last 3 to 5 words, in a questioning tone. Sounds stupid, right? It's not. Here's why. When you mirror someone, you're doing 3 things at once. 1. You're showing you were actually listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk. 2. You're buying time to process what they said instead of reacting emotionally. 3. You're inviting them to expand, to tell you more, to dig deeper into what they actually mean. Example, your aging parent says, I don't want to move out of this house. It's too much change. Bad response. But Mum, it's too big for you. You can't maintain it. You're arguing her stated position. Mirrored response. Too much change? Sayed as a question. Curious. Not challenging. Now what happens? She starts explaining. The real reason. Maybe it's not about the house. Maybe it's about independence. Maybe it's about losing control. Maybe it's about memories. And now you're having a real conversation instead of a debate about square footage. The second technique is labeling. Labeling is when you identify an emotion you're observing and call it out. It seems like you're frustrated. You sound angry about this. I sense some hesitation here. Again, sounds simple, almost too simple. But here's what labeling does. It shows the other person you see them as a human with feelings, not just an obstacle to overcome. And when someone feels genuinely seen, they stop fighting you, especially with family, your kids, your parents, your spouse. Real scenario, you're selling your house. A buyer is being difficult about the inspection. They keep finding problems and asking for price reductions. Frustrated response. Look, every house has minor issues. Stop being unreasonable. Labeled response. I get the sense you might be feeling uncertain about this investment. That's fair. This is a big decision. What changes? Their defensiveness drops. They're not fighting to prove you wrong anymore. They're actually talking to you. One more thing about labeling. You can also label what's not being said. I notice you seem hesitant, even though on paper this seems like a good deal for you. This is powerful because it brings the real conversation to the surface, the one that matters, the one beneath the words. Because most arguments aren't really about what we're arguing about. Your fight with your spouse about money? It's probably not about money. It's about security, or control, or feeling valued. Your argument with your adult child about how they're living their life? It's not about the choices. It's about feeling like they still respect you. When you can identify and label the real emotion, the real conversation becomes possible. And that's when things actually change. Here's something most people get wrong. They think negotiation is about being persuasive, about being articulate, making your best case, presenting your strongest argument. Wrong. Negotiation is about asking the right questions. Voss discovered this in real hostage situations. The negotiators who talked the most? Lost. The negotiators who asked the best questions? Won. Think about it biologically. When someone's talking, their brain is in a certain state. They're in presentation mode. They're locked into their position. But when they're answering a genuine question, their brain has to work. They have to think. They have to search for an answer. And while they're searching, they might actually find the truth. This is why so many arguments never resolve. Both people are in presentation mode, both trying to convince, neither actually thinking. Voss teaches something called open-ended questions, and they're game changers. An open-ended question can't be answered with yes or no. It requires thought. Closed question. Do you want to sell the house for less? Open-ended question. What would make this house price feel right to you? See the difference? One shuts down the conversation. One opens it up. But there's a specific type of open-ended question that's even more powerful. It's called a calibrated question. These are questions that sound open, but they're actually subtly directing the conversation toward a solution. Calibrated questions start with how, what, and they're designed so that the other person can't just blame external circumstances. Example, your real estate agent says, "The market's just too slow right now. We might not get full price." Bad response, "That's not acceptable." Calibrated question, how would you approach this if you were selling your own house? Now they're not defending the market. They're thinking like a seller. They're problem solving with you. Another example with family. Your adult child says, "I'm not ready to settle down yet. You don't understand my generation." Argument response, "That's just an excuse. You're wasting your potential." Calibrated question, what does ready actually look like to you? Now you're not fighting about whether they should settle down. You're understanding their actual timeline and values. Here's the thing about calibrated questions. They also prevent you from accepting false limits. When someone says we can't do that, instead of arguing, ask, what would need to happen for that to be possible? Most of the time? Something could happen. They just haven't thought about it yet. And here's the psychological trick. When you ask how or what, it's much harder for someone to say no. Can you reduce your price? Easy no. How would you structure a price that works for both of us? Much harder to dismiss. You're not asking for permission. You're asking them to think, to problem solve, to collaborate. The moment you switch from making statements to asking questions, you shift from adversary to partner. And when you're a partner instead of an adversary, everything changes. Alright, let's get specific. Because understanding these concepts is one thing. Using them in your actual life? That's different. Scenario number 1, negotiating medical bills. You get a hospital bill for $5,000. You think it should be $2,500 based on what you know. Don't call angry. Don't immediately demand a discount. Step 1. Tactical empathy. I got a bill and I want to make sure I understand it correctly. Can you help me? Already positioned as collaborative. Step 2. Ask questions. What's included in this $5,000 charge? How was this amount calculated? Is this the standard rate for this procedure? Let them explain. You're listening to understand, not to argue. Step 3. Mirror and label. So the $5,000 includes the facility fee, the surgeon's fee, and the anesthesiologist. Is that right? If they push back on your concern, I sense you might think I'm trying to get out of paying what I owe. That's not it. I just want to understand the breakdown. Step 4. Calibrated question. What options would someone have if they found this rate higher than expected? Notice, you're not demanding a discount. You're asking what the actual options are. They'll often mention payment plans, financial assistance, or adjustments. Real example. A 72-year-old woman received a $12,000 medical bill. Using these techniques, she got it reduced to $8,000 and negotiated a payment plan. She did this calmly, respectfully, and without burning any bridges. Scenario number 2. Real estate negotiation. You're selling your house. An offer comes in $20,000 below your asking price. Instinct. This is insulting. Counter at asking price. Better approach. Step 1. Ask why. Help me understand what led to this offer. What concerns do you have about the property? Step 2. Listen. Actually listen. There might be legitimate issues you can address. There might be something the buyer is worried about that's not about price at all. Step 3. Mirror. So you're concerned about the roof, the plumbing, and the neighborhood school ratings? Step 4. Label. I sense you're uncertain about the long-term value of this investment. Step 5. Calibrated question. How could we address these concerns in a way that makes this feel like a solid investment to you? Notice, you're not negotiating price. You're negotiating what matters to them. Maybe they need a home inspection guarantee. Maybe they need assurance about the school district. Maybe they're worried about resale value. Sometimes the answer has nothing to do with lowering your price. Scenario number 3. Family dynamics. Your aging parent refuses to let you help with finances, refuses to discuss the future. It's causing you real stress. Wrong approach. Mum, you need to accept that you can't do this alone. She digs in. Argument. Defensiveness. Right approach. Step 1. Tactical empathy. I know you've always been independent. That matters to you. Step 2. Mirror and label. You seem concerned about losing control of your financial life. That makes sense. That's important. Step 3. Ask, don't tell. What would it look like if you could maintain control while also having me in the loop? Now you're not taking something from her, you're building something together. Step 4. Calibrated question. What would need to change in how I approach this for you to feel comfortable? Notice the shift? She goes from defensive to problem solving. Scenario number 4. You're a teenager. They come home with a bad grade. Instead of, why did you get a C? You're capable of so much better. Try, I see you got a C. What happened with this class? Then mirror? So the material was harder than you expected? Label? You sound frustrated, but also like maybe you didn't ask for help? Calibrated. What would help you get back on track? Same outcome. You want them to do better. But now they're not defending themselves. They're thinking about solutions. Here's the pattern in all of these. Empathy questions, listening, mirroring, labeling, calibrated questions, collaboration. When you follow that sequence, people stop arguing with you. They start working with you. There's one more thing Voss teaches that changes everything. Most of us approach negotiation from a place of fear. Fear of losing the deal. Fear of not getting what we want. So we compromise too much. We split differences we shouldn't. We accept less than we should because we're afraid of walking away. Voss says, no deal is better than a bad deal. And when you truly believe that, everything changes. Because the moment the other person senses you're desperate, you've lost leverage. But the moment they sense you're okay walking away, they suddenly want to make it work. This applies to salaries, to house prices, to relationships, to family situations. You're negotiating a job offer. The salary is lower than you expected. If you act like you desperately need this job, they'll lowball you forever. But if you can genuinely say, this is a great opportunity, but this salary doesn't work for my situation. I need, and then be willing to walk away, suddenly they're motivated to make it work. Same with your house sale. Same with your family negotiations. When you're not attached to the outcome, you have power. This is psychological, but it's real. The best negotiators are the ones who are prepared to walk away, not as a threat, but as a genuine option. If your spouse won't work on the relationship despite your efforts, you need to be willing to walk away, not to threaten. But so you're not negotiating from a place of desperation. If a job doesn't value you appropriately, you need to be willing to keep looking, so you don't take less than you're worth. If your adult child won't respect your boundaries, you need to be willing to distance yourself, not as punishment, but as self-respect. The paradox: when you're truly willing to lose the deal, you're most likely to win a good one. Because you're not settling, you're not desperate, you're not in scarcity mindset, you're in abundance mindset. There are other jobs, other houses, other opportunities, and that changes how you show up in the negotiation. So here's what you do Monday morning. One conversation, one negotiation, one argument you've been avoiding. Apply one of these techniques. Just one. Ask a calibrated question instead of making a statement. Mirror instead of defending. Label an emotion instead of dismissing it. Notice what happens. Because the truth is, most conflicts in our lives aren't about what we think they're about. They're about being heard, about being understood, about feeling like the other person actually sees us. When you give people that, when you genuinely try to understand instead of convince, everything changes. You don't need to be aggressive. You don't need to fight harder. You just need to ask better questions, like an FBI agent. If this resonated with you, check out Never Split the Difference. It's worth the read. And if you found this useful, share it with someone you're in conflict with, not as an accusation, as a gift. Because the best negotiation happens when both sides actually want to understand each other. See you in the next one.